Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy. Rise up, O flame, by thy light flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy. Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing, show to us beauty, vision, and joy.
Hello, welcome to this virtual service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Waynesboro, situated in Virginia's beautiful Shenandoah Valley. Last Sunday, our service recognized that we've been at this for a while now. In fact, it's been more than a year now since last time we came together in person to worship. These services are for many of us a touchstone, a way of experiencing part of what we do when we are able to look in each other's faces. We're all tired and ready for this trial to be over, but we are hopeful and grateful that this country isn't doing bad getting people vaccinated. We're no longer at the height of a surge. We've had difficulties and losses, but in the words of the song, we're still here. Let's continue observing guidelines and push toward the day we are back together. Hello, my name is Lauren Nash, and I have been part of this community for 20 years at least. This congregation values diversity as a strength and a blessing. We're still learning to be the best that we can be. That is the journey of life. But we set it as our task to ever broaden the circle of welcome and love. Gender, man, woman, non-binary, transgender, cisgender, sexual orientation of all labels, race, ethnicity, national origin, skin pigmentation, wealth or poverty, social status. There are so many areas of difference, both natural and culturally determined. All of them bring gifts of experience to the whole that will help everyone grow and prosper if we let them. We invite you to join in this journey toward wholeness. If you are interested in learning more about this congregation and about Unitarian Universalism or about becoming a member, please watch for the slide at the end giving contact emails for our membership team and for our minister. We welcome you today and hope to see you soon when we are back together in person. Now, let us kindle the chalice of our hearts with these words by Bear W. Koleske. As we light the chalice, we join our hearts to the one great flame of bright compassion, beloved community, and fervent justice. May we become lanterns to the world, lighting the way for all.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let
I am so glad to be with you all again for the second time. Thank you so much, Reverend Paul, for inviting me back. In the time since I was last here, we've experienced more loss. I know I lost 2 friends in January. You may have family or friends who've been sick or who have died. And because of all this loss and grief, it hasn't always been an easy time. It's often been stressful for many of us. And so, aware of this, I want to ask us to join in a time of guided meditation. Place your feet on the floor or on the earth. Make yourself comfortable where you are seated, or shift your body to a comfortable position if you are lying down. And breathe in deeply. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. Now let yourself breathe naturally. Be comforted, for the earth holds us up. Let your body relax as you breathe in and out. In silence, if you are aware of thoughts, let them go by like leaves on the surface of a stream. If feelings come, whatever they are, take note of them and let them flow out with the outward flow of your breathing. We are breathing together the breath of life. We are all interconnected. Let us be aware, then, of someone we love. Let the love we remember fill our lungs with the air we breathe. Let us breathe out compassion for those who are in pain. Breathing in and out, we can be conscious that we are one with all living beings. Now, as our meditation ends and we wiggle our fingers and toes, slowly open your eyes. Think of those who have shared or are holding joys and sorrows or concerns, and let us hold them all in our hearts and in our prayers. So may it be. Amen.
Shine on me, oh shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me, oh shine on me. Yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me. Lift me up, oh, lift me up. Let the light from the lighthouse lift me up, oh, lift me up. Yes, lift me up. Let the light from the lighthouse lift me up. Oh, hold me close. Yes, hold me close. Let the light from the lighthouse hold me close. Yes, hold me close. Oh, hold me close. Let the light from the lighthouse, please, hold me close. Oh, shine on me, yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me. Oh, shine on me. Yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on
My name is Marilyn Nash, and I'm going to read The Buddha's Last Instruction by Mary Oliver. Make of yourself a light, said the Buddha before he died. I think of this every morning as the east begins to tear off its many clouds of darkness to send up the first signal, a white fan streaked with pink and violet, even green. An old man, he lay down between two sala trees, and he might have said anything, knowing it was his final hour. The light burns upward, it thickens and settles over the fields. Around him the villagers gathered and stretched forward to listen. Even before the sun itself hangs, detached in the blue air, I am touched everywhere by its ocean of yellow waves. No doubt he thought of everything that had happened in his difficult life. And then I feel the sun itself as it blazes over the hills like a million flowers on fire. Clearly, I'm not needed. Yet I feel myself turning into something of inexplicable value. Slowly, beneath the branches, he raised his head. He looked into the faces of that frightened crowd.
Causes no caravan of despair.
Make of yourself a light. If the Buddha actually gave that advice to his frightened disciples, what might he have meant? I decided to explore that first by reflecting on what life itself has meant and might mean to us today. What might an ordinary night light mean to a child afraid of the dark, or a street light to a teenager or adult out on the town or heading home? When my sibs and I were young, our mom told us about her ride home from the college classes in Storrs, Connecticut, back to Hartford for Thanksgiving or Christmas, and she would see in the distance this light at the top of the Travelers Insurance Company. And that was a comforting signal that she was almost home. In a faraway time that we might barely be able to manage, our ancestors discovered they could light a fire. What a blessing to be able to see in the dark, and they could cook their own food. For centuries, folks have lit hearths and candles. Thanks to the inventors of light bulbs, at night when stars or the moon don't suffice, we do have lights available that comfort us, dispel our fears, lift our spirits, and light the streets, byways, and highways, and other pathways, providing safety as we travel to places we want to go. And how do light and light metaphors enter into our faith and practice? The hymn, "Be ye lamps unto yourself," tells us to hold confidently to the truth within us, that inner spark of wisdom or recognition that comes sometimes in silence. It may teach us something we already knew in our heads but had forgotten. It may be the moment when that wisdom becomes soul deep. In the early 1940s, when the Unitarian Service Committee saved dissidents and Jews from the Nazis, an artist developed a chalice symbol for the committee logo. Because of the courage shown by these rescuers, to me, the flaming chalice is a sacred call to courage, compassion, community, and the justice, which is love, in public. In the Catholic tradition, candles are lit when praying near the altar, and we have adopted something similar when we light a candle of joy or sorrow. Lights can have spiritual significance, and they can focus our attention when we want to meditate in mindfulness. So to recap about real and metaphoric lights, they provide comfort, they provide solace, safety, heat for our homes and our food, guidance for our journeys. They lift our spirit in dark times and dispel our own and our children's fear. They sometimes keep us from tripping over something, and they help bring us peace and connection with our sacred inner spark. So what could the Buddha have meant when he advised his frightened disciples to make of themselves a light? I think he meant first to open themselves to the reality of their inner self, beyond that self they present while busy every day doing things, and I think that's relevant to us today. I think it means taking time to be aware of who we are beyond the labels that we attach to ourselves and our various identities and so on. And I think it means to pay attention to our oneness with all the humans and beings of our planet. To pay attention to all our beauty, all our suffering, and the possibility of healing. I am remembering moments. I am remembering a camping trip to Rhode Island during a long, low time in my early 30s, a time when I wondered what my life was about, what life was about at all. A walk from the campsite and along a path, and then I stopped because I was taken by the whiteness of a birch along the path, and I moved closer to it and I touched its bark. And I understood then, without any warning or expectation, that I was kin to that tree, and it was kin to me, and I knew that we were part of each other, both dwelling in what we call the interdependent web of all existence. And I knew that my life and the tree's life were gifts. Sometimes an inner light of consciousness, of awareness, comes that way so suddenly when we are in the darkness of discouragement or despair. My call to ministry came to me a few months later, and ministry gave me that blessing of being able to share my sense that we are all connected, and life is a gift, even in the hardest of times. I think to make of yourself or myself a light is to take a risk, to show forth our truth, our courage, our compassion in ways that both heal and encourage others to action, to show forth what is possible and to inspire hope, to manifest that inner truth that we are one, to act for love and justice, and I am in particular called to act for a livable climate. And for whom shall I act? For whom shall we act? The Bible says we are to love ourselves as we love our neighbors. And who is our neighbor? The disciple of Jesus asked, and Jesus told the story of the Good Samaritan who stopped on the side of the road to help someone who was different from him. And because it was someone different from him, and that person had helped a stranger in need, Jesus was communicating that everyone is our neighbor. To make of ourselves a light is to build bridges connecting us, not ignoring differences, but rather learning from each other. In our faith, we draw the circle wide, we say. We strive to affirm justice, equity, and compassion for all, and to promote these through word and deed. And when we do this, when we make every effort or any effort to do this, I think we are making of ourselves lights. But it is easier sometimes to say it than to do it. I found not too long ago that I was running short on energy for the work that I consider my unpaid ministry, the work of activism. I'm especially engaged in climate action. And during the pandemic, I've done this work from the blue couch. You see me sitting here right now. Here's where I make phone calls, check emails, write texts, organize meetings, Zooms, webinars, more and more Zoom. But for a couple of weeks there, I was feeling a weariness. Despite all the wonderful sharing of ideas and actions we were engaged in virtually, I was wanting to draw in. I didn't want to look at another email or go to another Zoom meeting, and I had never had burnout, but I figured this was something like it. The great Albert Schweitzer wrote, "At times our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another." Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. And Wendell Berry wrote, "When despair for the world grows in me and I wake in the night at the least sound and fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free." Sounds restful, even idyllic, but I don't live near wood drakes or easily accessed water, and but yes, I am getting more flexible in my older age. I remembered that when I am weary, I can find that peace when I feel the blessing of water pouring over me as I shower. And I do feel more motivated and hopeful when I have a good sharing talk with a friend or trusted counselor, a minister or rabbi, a colleague or activist friend, and when I do FaceTime calls with my beloved daughter, son-in-law, and granddaughter, that love we share helps me feel more restored. It restores the light of my hope and strengthens my conviction to act for the sake of myself and of them. And I feel grateful. Someone wrote that we are not engaged in saving the planet. It will survive without us. We are engaged in saving a livable world for humans and all beings, and the foundation of that work is relational. As a mostly white religious association, we need to create stronger relationships of solidarity and allyship with those that climate change most deeply affects. vulnerable communities of color, Black, brown, and indigenous peoples and poor people, and youth who fear for their future. Young people like my granddaughter and her friends and the people in her performance company grieve and share their grief and cry out for us older folks to join with them in their passionate advocacy because they know they can't do this alone. When we are weary, tired, overwhelmed, we need to draw on our roots, the why of what we choose to do. I do this work for my granddaughter and her friends and all the children of this world. Anger at injustice can be a strong motivation, but for me, I find that conjuring the love, their example and teachings of my parents gone long before, or visualizing and manifesting my love for my granddaughter, my daughter, my son-in-law, my sister and brother, my brother-in-law, my friends, my sister-in-law, my church and synagogue communities, or dancing in the living room, walking outside and noticing the neighbors and waving, seeing the wind blowing the new blossoms, all these heal my soul and build my resilience. Sharing in groups our fears and hopes and our growing understanding more and more that there are solutions to this climate crisis, our belief that there is the possibility of change if we will get together and do the work. These help us strengthen our witness and advocacy for the world we hope to help to heal. And these are times when I feel I am able to make of myself a light. This is Women's History Month. And some fellow climate reality activists and I've been reading a book, All We Can Save, chapter by chapter. It includes stories by and about women and men. And I want to tell you a story about one woman who's making history today as she and others with her make of themselves a light. Varshini Prakash, the founder of the Sunrise Movement, is the daughter of immigrant Indian parents. I thought of Wendell Berry's poem when I read her story. As a teenager learning about the climate crisis, Varshini would lie awake late into the night, fearing for her own future. She wondered what would happen to her and other skinny brown kids who looked like her, what would happen when the crisis led to food shortages and wars, greater injustices and violence. What would people do in response to others who sought sanctuary in their lands? Varshini was in the U.S. and safe when the terrible 2015 storm deluge struck her grandparents' homeland in Chennai. Her grandparents were fortunately away from their home and escaped the event, but they did learn of the destruction of their property from the landlord, and they also learned, and Varshini did too, about all the disease and death that followed. And Varshini wrote that she still lives with nightmare images of that time. So in college, she majored in environmental science, and she was invited to speak before a massive crowd. And trembling, Varshini took up the challenge, and she found her powerful voice. And that led her to co-found and be a leader of Sunrise, an ever-growing climate justice movement of young people. They took leadership in promoting the Green New Deal, a legislative idea that would be a comprehensive and justice-making approach to dealing with our climate crisis in the U.S. Not the only one, perhaps, but a very important one. History makers are not always famous. And history is rarely made by one individual, but many individuals together offering their gifts can and do make history. Most are familiar with Greta Thunberg, the young Swedish girl who has called leaders to account about the worsening climate crisis in the strongest terms, but perhaps we are less familiar with a growing cadre of young climate activists. They are everywhere. The Climate Reality Project, a global movement, is inviting young people to trainings, and many of them who attend are establishing college chapters or founding community chapters. The Sierra Club sponsors student coalitions on college campuses, and in this month of women's history, many women, younger and older, are joining the great collective of climate activists, and like Varshini, by their choices, they are making history day by day. My granddaughter, Hannah Cullen, is one of them. She and her multiracial, multigender, multigenerational performance company are learning. They are learning together about the intersectional impact of all the injustices, and they are acting on climate and racial injustices as well as voter suppression, which will have an impact on that as well, taking positive steps and making of themselves lights for the future. What do these young folks do when they get weary, when their hope burns low? I think they remember that we cannot do most anything of significance by ourselves. We need one another, and that is why they are crying out for our partnership. Whether younger or older, every one of us experiences triumphs and failures, suffering and overcoming, fear and a willingness to take a risk, and a chance even when afraid, which is what courage is about. We learn from failures and successes if we're open to the lessons they teach. Take one step and another may be easier to take. Other stories and our own stories inspire us to take one step and then another. Sharing with each other, we can be the ones who light the flames within the ones who are weary, and they can light the flames within us. Every one of us is, whether we know it or not, a maker of history. All of us are capable of making of ourselves a light. I leave you with questions to ponder. What are your roots? What are the sources of your resilience? What holds you? What or to whom do you turn when you need someone to listen? How do you foster your own presence so that you can listen mindfully when another person needs you? How do or can we make of ourselves translucent lights that allow our truths to shine forth, that bring comfort, inspire hope, strengthen courage, and from our faith and the lessons of resilience we learn one day at a time, offer a bit of guidance to lead a person home or nurture our congregations and communities on toward the next steps of their paths. Let us think on these things. Blessed be. Amen.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere.
Hello, my name is Adrienne Young, and I wanted to talk to you about the eighth principle. So, just to refresh your memory, the eighth principle says, we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. That beautiful passage, so eloquently written, says you're going to be a good ally. That's the basis of the whole thing. Now, the difference between what the other principles say and what the eighth principle says is action. The eighth principle says that you are going to work to dismantle, take apart, dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. Now, as far as I'm concerned, as a new UU person, the other 7 principles are fantastic, but they kind of tell you how you're going to feel. This one says what I'm going to do, and that's what sets it apart. That's why it's important. Being a good ally isn't just agreeing that something is wrong, or that something is oppressive, or that a group is being marginalized or mistreated. It's doing something about it. That's what allyship is. Allyship is, yeah, coming aside, but allyship is action. Allyship says, I'm not just going to talk about it, I'm going to be about it. That's who I'm going to be. And as a person who was new to the UUFW, I assumed that that's who we already were, without really taking into account that, yeah, there's racism and marginalization in our communities and in our institutions and in our traditions and in our agencies, but there is also that within ourselves. And we have to be willing to dig deep and do the heavy lifting. The eighth principle says that I'm not just going to talk about what is wrong in my community. I'm going to do something about it. And so, what does that mean for the UUFW? To me, it's individual. Every person is going to be called to give an account in some way and at some point on what they really believe. One of the ways the UUFW made a stand was with the Black Lives Matter flag outside, even though it had been vandalized. It's like that. So, as a congregation, we can do things like that, that say what we believe. But I think the most important part of the eighth principle is, what are you going to do? How are you going to serve with your feet? How are you going to make a change? You educate yourself. That's one. You learn about people that are different than you. You learn about their traditions and their customs and their hardships and their culture. And you learn in what ways their existence has benefited you. You come alongside and you stand along with, so that they have support in the things that they are trying to do for themselves. Because in doing so, you're doing it for yourself too. Because you are part of that beloved community that you're trying to create. It's not hard to be an ally. But it's not enough to just say you champion something. You have to actually do something about it. So, talk is cheap. What are you going to do? And how are you going to do it? And who are you going to do it for? That's what the eighth principle is about. And I am all in. I hope you are too.
I am thankful that I had a chance to listen to Adrian's spiritual message about the 8th principle. She speaks her truth with love. She tells us that the 8th principle calls on UUs as individuals and as congregations, not only to speak about our commitments to justice and equity and compassion, but also, and most importantly, to take accountable action to dismantle racism and other oppressions, to put words into real steps, to be accountable allies. If the 8th principle is accepted, the charge to the congregations and its members will be to live into its words through action to meet its call to be justice. For our benediction, I want to share the words of the Reverend Dr. Mark Morrison Reed, an African-American UU minister who writes why he thinks the church is so important for the journey. The title is The Task of the Religious Community. He writes, the central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together our vision widens, and our strength is renewed. May we think on these things. Amen and blessed be.